Hi everyone. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about a little bit of a sensitive topic actually. And I know this is it has a lot of connotations and a lot of baggage when it comes to this verses in the Quran. And the reason it kind of, got me thinking again because I will explain what happened. So I saw a TikTok or a reel, an Instagram reel. I think I'll try to link it. And in this reel, there's this woman who clearly is very cult mentality, wearing a pink abaya and hijab, and she's explaining how she's so incensed and heartbroken and angry about these particular translations of the verses. And um, she goes on to now give you the actual meaning translation of the verses that now she has figured out. So the verses are, of course, if you haven't guessed already, it's wadrubuhunna, the verse that is so tricky. So yeah, you can get angry and blame the men for the wrong translation. I just feel like it's so easy to blame again the translators, the men, and all these other people who really didn't figure it out. But now we have these new people who finally figured out the meaning and what it really means. So I just wanted to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little rundown observation, because if you really wanted to figure out, you don't really only have this one verse to like sit and dissect. You have a whole, whatever, you just take the whole thing as it is, the whole package. And it's easy to go simply on any hadith website and put the word hit. You want to get a feel, an idea of what is the word times and the people and their attitudes and culture, put in the word hit and see what pops up. So yes, a lot of incidents, more detailed incidents of what happened. So in case you're wondering that maybe domestic violence and hitting didn't occur, so no, that was not the case. They're pretty violent people. They were pretty physical, easy to angry, and you kind of know how they saw women prior and even up to that point. So I'll give you a couple instances of the stories that I'm trying to explain to you, maybe if you haven't read it. For example, we have certain incidents of a hadith where a woman comes to the Prophet and explains that her husband's hitting her. And he says, okay, go back, tell him to stop. So, like he was unaware that happened. She comes back a second time and he says, no, it continues. He's hitting me. And he gives her a piece of cloth or something. And he says, again, tell him to stop. Don't do it. And then poor woman goes back to the same situation. She comes back a third time. And again, what do you think he said? He said, yeah, just don't do it. Stop. So in case you were wondering, maybe he wasn't aware or he didn't know, or, they were such a peaceful and loving community, these things didn't exist. No, these things happened. There were incidents of abuse and hitting and wives getting beaten up. And he did knew about it. Cases were brought to him. He didn't outright say, do not hit, domestic abuse is, wrong. Do not, like, your wives are this, do not hit them. That was an easy solution, wasn't it? That didn't happen. So if I go into more detail, I think it'll be a little more disturbing, but I think it's very necessary to examine it and say it for what it is. I'm glad you're trying to find new perspectives and new ideas, but I will come back to that argument back into why that's really not a good case. So now we have another incident, and the word that's used, guess what word is used in like the Arabic, like when they're narrating this hadith, they're using daraba. They're using that word. So again, we have a very clear meaning of what that word means. The next incident happens, another incident that I wanted to mention was the incident of a brother coming forward and complaining about the fact that his sister was beaten up pretty badly, her hands broken. And this is a man this time coming forward complaining about a instance of abuse. He has broken her hand, and the prophet says, okay, call that man. And he tells him, like, you know what, whatever the dues between you guys, if she owes you anything, take that and then just divorce her peacefully. We are not, that's all that was. There was no, and he agrees, because you have to take permission. You can't just walk up and leave. So he agrees to divorce her, and she stays there. He's like, wait, it was not like a full iddah. You wait a month and then you leave, go back to your family. Is there a punishment? Is there a whole verse coming down about how heinous this act is? No. Are there people like protesting? Is there a women's march group saying, wait a second, isn't this like really bad? We should all like band together and say, you better put an end to this. We are not going to take beating up, like hitting. This is like really gone out of hand. You really need to put some measures in place. So we don't see that. There's no punishment. Unless he really gorges out her eye, or like when you go into the level of like, really, then you pay some blood money or whatever, but we're not seeing the whole domestic abuse, which is hitting. That's not a case. So let me also paint a wider picture, because you're like, okay, this is only husband and wife, but domestic abuse is domestic physical abuse, even between parent and child. So there, the word daraba is exactly used in that same meaning. So we do have the instance, the very good hadith of how Aisha was, because of her necklace incident, and her father does comment on her and pretty much hits her. He's angry with her, hits her physically, and she's narrating the story. She's saying firsthand that, yes, he did come. He was pretty angry. He hit me, and because of that whole, I delayed the whole thing, and we went on a search thing. Now, mind you, this is a grown woman, a married woman. Okay, she is the wife of your leader now, but he's the dad. He's like, you know what? I can hit her. So there's no repentance. There's no wrong. It's all presented as like matter of factly that this happens, and we do accept it. So, maybe your outrage and incensing anger is really misguided, misleading. What are you going to complain about? All these hadiths are wrong. All these people really mistranslate the word. They're telling you wrong stories. And I think the most damning piece of evidence was basically there are hadiths explaining how there were people who went and saw the Prophet give his final sermon, and he explained exactly how to treat women and this, and he explained that verse where he says, if your wives, whatever the reason is, they invite somebody that you don't like to the house, then you can, how do you admonish, and what do you do? Admonish. So yeah, beat them, and beat them in a way where you're not like physically leaving marks. So there. So they kind of explained it. So that's where all these translations are coming from. That's why all these years, all these hundreds of people, scholars, that's how they're basing they're not just pulling something out of their, That's where it came from. And you're getting angry at these translators and these scholars, like, oh God, they didn't know what they're talking about. They don't know, but you kind of figure out the second, third, fourth, fifth meaning. But the first obvious meaning, those people didn't know. The people, like, they have no clue what that word means. And let's just go a step deeper, because here we're talking about translations. But really, if somebody goes with the first word translation and they're telling you that this is in the Quran, are they really wrong? Is it really a crime? No. There's no crime. Why is it suddenly so criminal today? Why is it suddenly so angering today? It's because of how I described in my earlier videos. It's like when spiritually, as a society, we collectively move forward and we have now new standards, we have new levels of consciousness, it's so hard to accept that now. That's the reason why it's suddenly so, they just can't seem to reconcile that anymore. It's just not working. So that's why suddenly there's this whole new movement to like, let's rectify the whole meaning. And who are these people who came up with these wrong translations? Because they are the ones who are actually wrong. When in fact, that was the whole time. It was there the whole time for hundreds of years. It was the practice. Look at their whole culture. That's what it was. Again, there's a hadith of Umar hitting his wife. I mean, you can really like use all your defense mechanisms, like, oh, that's not, no, that's like, that's a wrong hadith, that's this. And he's basically saying, like, this is a matter of husband, wife, do not interfere. Somebody witnessed him doing that. God knows what happens behind closed doors. And, like with all these incidents happening, there is really no clear, direct mandate to stop it, just like a lot of other things, which I mentioned in my earlier videos about slavery. There's no really, they're not coming down and, it's not like they accidentally missed it. There were issues. He's seeing a lot of violent, bloody crimes. But, they didn't come down with that verse. They came down with these verses. And let's just be honest. Like, I want you to take an honest look into yourself and be like, will God really give you such an ambiguous word, which the first meaning is not going to be the meaning, it's going to be third, fourth, fifth meaning? Really? That's what God wants to do, play mind games with you? Really? That's all the best you can come up with? So no, don't blame all these other scholars and hundreds of years of history and culture and everything. I think it's really time to get a wake-up call. There are all these evidence and pieces of information that is not suiting you now in your time, and now it's really causing a dissonance. And I wanted to go more into that from a psychology perspective, because these issues have been going on for many years. So how are people actually coping with it? So there had to be some sort of dissonance. Like you couldn't, like how would you hold those two opposing thoughts or values or whatever you want to call it, like in your belief system? So I think the first one, which I heard was that, it's just not really right now. It's not for our culture. It was that time. It was a practice for that time. And at that time it was needed. So that's why it's there. And, conveniently, it's like put down into this book that was supposed to be forever. And they're put them down as actual mandates. And like, these are what we can base our laws and jurisprudence on now forever. Okay. And the second way they do a cognitive dissonance is the verses that they're talking about are actually these other women. They're like the really, these are the real women who are like really bad, who are Muslim, but really, it's like this other group of women. It was like the really strict, most furthest thing. It was for them. It's not really for me and you. It's not for like us. We are not really those people. It was for that group of people who are really like, there are women who are so, too much, and they really need to be like controlled, and like women do say that. Believe it or not, women do say that. They do agree with a lot of these things for hundreds of years. They agreed with this. So the other verse I was talking about, like the other Quran hadith, was about, which again I think might be again retranslated and purposed for a newer meaning, which is when you're take your kids for prayer at the age of 7 and hit them by the age of 10. So what do you have to say about child abuse here? Is this also going to be a word like reinterpreted? No, this means like show them by example, create a distance, take a travel, just suffer. Like, what are you going to use here? So take a moment, re-examine all of this, look at the wider picture of the culture, These people were used to the fact of hitting and domestic violence. And this religion was a big deal because apparently it was kind of curbing it as well. They're like, okay, not too much. Don't make it obvious. Don't like really, physically like disable them. But the seeds are there. It's there. And I think you might be the one in question if you are actually questioning the word of God and saying, that's not what he meant. That's not the first obvious meaning. That's not what he meant. Anybody who went to court and tried to explain this new defense that, well, it says in the Quran, is he wrong? She was really doing this, and I followed the Quran. I did what this, and I turned my back on her, and then I turned around and slapped her. I didn't leave a mark. She was becoming like, it was my duty to tell her what to do, how to like, behave, or not being a good Muslim, and not being a good Muslima. And it's all like funny when you're the one in that position. Then you're like, hang on a second, that's not for me. This verse, it wasn't supposed to. I'm not that person. So that's when it gets tricky. Because what are you going to do? Take him to court? Your Islamic court is not going to do anything. He's right. And that's where a lot of women are absolutely incensed, angry, and they're just want these new, like, no, how can you say that? How can God have said that? How can the prophet like forget to put this big clause and tell you exactly how to treat and not don't lift a finger, don't raise your voice. How dare you? That's missing. I think the most interesting aspect is you actually did go online and check the word hit, because let's be honest, like all the hadiths that use the word darab is exactly what it means. And it's a pretty physical hit. It's not like it's a physical hit, So I'm going to end this video here because I think it might get you more into like explaining and repeating things, and I don't want to get too caught up in anger, because honestly these arguments are so old. If anybody's actually done like any religious studies or whatever 20-30 years ago, like there were all these other new Qurans and new translations, Amna Wadud, all these new people who came, and they weren't widely accepted. It wasn't the time for that. A lot of people did agree, and they're like, well, okay, here's some saving grace, maybe we can just take this new translation, but in today's time and period, a lot of these practices now have become so hard to defend, and they're like, wait, we really can't, we just really can't take this and explain it in another new way, so now they're, again, like I told you about this other cultural practice, they're going to backtrack and try to like revamp this whole PR, this image, and be like, that's not what it meant, that's not the translation, these people are wrong. Rather than stating the obvious, that was the situation, there were clear incidences, the people were like that, we have the same exact word used for the same exact meaning in other relationships and areas of our life. So yeah, there is that. And I hope this video makes you question, think, ponder deeply about the whole concept of like, yes, this is a very time-bound, culture-bound religion. And at that time, unfortunately, hitting your wife was not a big deal. This was not a crime. It was not a moral crime either. So we have child abuse. We have some certain level of like, do not hit in the face, but you do have some like, you are allowed to use physical discipline. I'm going to end this video here. I hope you guys found something of value and read up yourself. And I think that's what most people do, unless they want to see some TikTok videos about how these new translation, and they want to give hope. And but it requires a lot more. You can't simply gloss it over like this. And I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you.